Hello, this is Rudayna Abdo with Urban Nibbles, and my guest today is Rym Baouendi, joining us from Montreal. Hi, Rym.
Hi.
Good to see you. Rym, you are an urban sustainability specialist, an entrepreneur, and with a new specialty or a new interest with youth innovation, a consultant with Medina Works, and a founder of co-working space, an award-winning co-working space, I should add, Kojit in Tunis. And now one of your new ventures, Ubud, which involves youth. So lots of hats that you wear, but I'd like to focus today on carbon and energy and the impacts that the pandemic has had on the state of affairs with lockdown and what have you. And we've seen a lot of positive changes with this pandemic that has wrought havoc in many other places. But can you just give us a bit of an oversight of these impacts with our changing patterns as we've seen people move towards working from home, and therefore the reduction in carbon emissions from transportation and presumably from the impact on industrial activity? Can you just set the scene for us of what's happening, what has happened in the last 4 months globally?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me first, and it's great to discuss this topic and also follow the other topics that you've addressed in Urban Nibbles. So, I mean, it's quite simple, right? I mean, we have a slowdown in economic activity in general, and also we're focusing most of the activity in less urban assets, so meaning the home. So now the home became the workplace and the place where the kids learn. People go less to like restaurants, etc. They eat at home. So what happened is that when you do that, you get, less energy used, less emissions generated, more efficiency also because you're using less assets to do it. We've seen, I mean, many people talked about how air quality in cities, improved and less congestion and, nature coming back to the city and all this like very positive. Obviously, there's a balance about maintaining economic activity and social activity with the environmental. So that's a balance that we've always struggled as humanity, I think, to strike. So, as part of Medina Works, we've been playing a little bit with the numbers and looking at if you took like one scenario, like someone working in the US and used to work in an office and now is working from home, and we've created this calculator called Offset Go, where we can see how much increased energy consumption has been generated in the home, because you're no longer doing an activity in the office, but it's now becoming in the home. And also, what is the avoided emissions from not commuting back and forth from work. So it's interesting actually to look at these figures, because obviously the big gain here is that we don't commute. That's usually quite significant, especially for people who use their car, obviously, not like public transport or bicycles or other kind of more sustainable means of transport. That's one area. The second, also, if you look at usually like a watt per square meter, energy intensity in commercial space is usually higher than what you have in an office. So even if you take the office of the same area, here and compare them, you get a difference there, So there's savings happening in this case. But what also happened is that if you look at cost or carbon emissions, these things shifted boundaries. Before, the costs were being felt by the company. Now they're actually being felt by the employee, because basically the energy bill will increase from having either to heat or cool the space for a longer time, also for plugging more equipment. So many of the employees now are using obviously their laptop, which is not a big wattage, but maybe a big screen, a monitor, and other equipment to do their work. So that becomes something important to consider. So that's from the cost side. But for the carbon side, also the same. Many of the bigger companies now, and even smaller ones who are want to do the right thing and offset their carbon emissions and, you know, measure the carbon footprint and offset it, etc. Before, that kind of activity of doing your work, you know, on your laptop, etc., and your computer on your desk, used to be a direct emission for the company. So in the greenhouse gas protocol, which is a standard being used for carbon footprinting, that's kind of in the scope 1, you know, emissions. Everybody does it when they do carbon footprinting. Whereas if activity happens beyond the boundary of the company, in this case in the home, you know, that's kind of optional. Not every company will do it because it's outside. But now imagine these millions of people now working from home. Sometimes, I mean, for many companies, the full staff can be working from home. Can we still consider these emissions as indirect and outside of the scope of the company because they happen in the home? So we wanted to look into that, you know, and okay, if you compare sometimes to transport, especially for people who commute long distances, it might not be as significant, but they are there. And if you multiply by millions of people in that situations, I don't think we can ignore them. So I'd be curious to see like how many of the corporations will actually adapt to this and update their methodologies to hopefully include this, because I think the cumulative effect is quite important.
And whether they do it voluntarily or whether it becomes
Exactly.
regulated. And I'm
or
thinking
if the method will change also based on that. But our calculator is quite simple. I mean, we've done one for the US right now because, you know, that's what we wanted to explore it. It basically, you enter basic information about your space, where you used to work before, like what's your address before, what's your address now, what's your position also to kind of define what kind of type of office you might have, you know, is it closed office or is it open space, etc. And we can run the calculation quite nicely actually to give you an idea about what does your carbon footprint look like. So it shows you, okay, because you're working from home now, you've avoided this much carbon, but you have created new additional energy use, carbon, and cost in your home, and this is the 3 numbers. And also, you probably are leaving an empty office somewhere that might not be fully conditioned, but it's maintained at a certain temperature, and it has also carbon. So we're wasting some carbon. Yeah. So it's kind of nice to see that kind of big picture for what does that mean for you and how remote working. So so yeah, I mean, it was out of curiosity, but we're hoping to develop this into kind of a tool that corporation can use to capture that carbon cost, you know, for the employees, because
very interesting.
The technologies are not there.
Yeah, because I don't know if I've seen anything about that. And also what you just said, there is double counting because the spaces, office spaces are there, school spaces, they're not being utilized, but there still is embedded energy that's going in them. And it's interesting to see if the onus or the who's going to take this on. You're mentioning the corporations, but I wonder if the individuals, the employees, could be the ones to take this on as a tool, as incentive.
I think if both employees and the employers know about it, they're aware of it, then you get more engagement, right? From the employees. And I think what could make it even more beautiful if we can also offer incentives. You know, companies used to be paying offsets for the emissions that were generated by their activities before. What if that budget could be directed, for example, to help employees make home improvements or buy renewable energy certificates or other things? You know, okay, it's not, the cost is much higher than planting trees, let's say, but still these are investment on the long run. If you improve energy efficiency in a house, then it's going to be there with your employee, and even if they leave, somebody else will take the house and will continue you know, occupying a space that is much more energy efficient or where there's renewable energy installed, you know. So, you know, we have to rethink the whole model about like exactly what you said, like carbon, when we want to offset carbon emissions or not actually generate carbon in the first place, those who have an influence on generating it need to know and need to be aware. What does that mean? Like, how much am I actually contributing to this? And what is in my power to change or to offset or to maybe implement solutions that can change the situation? So yeah, I think we need to change all that, the way we're doing it, because otherwise, I mean, I think for most companies, okay, you do carbon footprinting, it goes on your annual report, And it's nice kind of to for people to know that you're doing the right thing, and you know, these efforts are really to be applauded, obviously. But if you're an employee of that company, like, what does that mean to you, you know? Or if you're a customer of that company, like, what does it tell you? Like, what is your part in it, you know? And I think we need to know that
Yeah, no,
to be
this is
motivated to take action.
the user, the direct user impact. And some companies before would issue incentives to use public transportation. So maybe these kinds of incentives could be
Exactly.
shifted
You
instead.
can shift the money somewhere else.
Exactly.
And anybody, I think most individuals, especially if you're a homeowner, you would want to improve that asset that you have. So it's a very, you know, it's a great way to for engagement. And even if you're renting, I mean, there are solutions now. I don't know if you've seen, actually I showed on Shark Tank, there's something called solar group hug. And it's system like it's a frame, like solar photovoltaic frame that you can hang on your window, so you don't have to install it. And it's kind of a great way to charge your tablets and your phones and things like that. So now we're having even systems that are not, that doesn't require like major installation work, you know. There are other systems like the smart metering system, you know, the Nest thermostats and these kind of things also that could be an interesting add-on in somebody's home to optimize the way we use energy. So, you know, something definitely I'm thinking about, and we're trying to see how we can integrate that aspect as well in this.
Fantastic. So you're starting to pilot in the US and see how that.
Yeah, right now, obviously, is we're still in early stages of development and kind of understanding what's the best way to design it in terms of what's the value proposition, who are we, you know, addressing specifically, etc. But I feel like it's something important. I think the impact is quite big. I mean, think of how many employees now are working remotely. And many of them actually, if you look at the statistics, they saying even after the pandemic, they would rather continue to do this way, at least partly, if not fully, you know. So I think it's a trend that is there and will continue.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the home now, but you can also think of it as the future is distributed work. So maybe one day I want to work from home, and the next day I want to work from a coffee shop, and the day after I want to work in you know, co-working space, or you know, share, or maybe on spend I don't know, my time working from a beach, you know. So how do we manage that now, like as a company wanting to track their carbon footprint and take this into consideration? How do you do it? And I think there's a need there.
Yeah. And what would you say of companies interested in tracking their carbon footprint? Are you starting to see a trend in increase in that, or is it's voluntary, it's SDG related, but what is the participation rate, would you say, and is it moving in the right direction?
Well, there were many companies, especially in the technology companies, that have recently announced you know, new goals of being carbon neutral. Some of them wanting even to go back, you know, historically and offset all their carbon since they started, like Microsoft, etc. So definitely the trend. I mean, we heard about it even before the pandemic and quite recently, you know. So some of the reasons, it's obviously the climate crisis is important, but it's also a great way to talk to their young employees that they want to attract, but also customers, etc. This is a topic that is really close to their heart, and I think for company to remain competitive and attract talent, etc., they increasingly seeing this as an important investment to do. So not just the environmental side, but also there's a business side to it as well.
Yeah, it seems like we have this great opportunity to shift towards cleaner energy incentives and implementation at all levels, and maybe we have this time sensitivity to make this happen. Moving forward, and do you think there are things that are at risk of being left behind, that we really should move forward from the patterns that we do? What are there some traps that we should be wary of, that once we are out of this mindset, out of this crisis mode, there is a risk of moving back in many ways? Can you think of ways that we could guard what this opportunity that we have available to us now. I know you've been talking about these incentives and new models. Is there anything else you can add to that?
Well, I think, for many of us, we have to be grateful for being safe and healthy during this time, and also for the new time that was created for us to reflect on many things that is linked to our lifestyles, our way of working, etc. If you pay attention to some of the changes, I mean, me personally, many changes happen, and actually you start valuing these changes and think, I want to continue implementing this, etc. But sometimes those choices that you'd like to make, you don't control them fully. So for example, if your company says, oh, guess what, pandemic is over, everybody back in the office. Okay, so we lost an opportunity there in relation to reducing our carbon emissions, or having this flexibility where people feel they have more time at home to do maybe more activities, spend more time with their families, eat healthier at home, etc. So I think that's the thing. I mean, we have, I'm hoping that people don't have short memory after this. It's an instinct to overnight say, oh, it's over, let's go and go back to partying, etc. Obviously these things are nice, but hopefully we can reach somewhere in the middle to reach that kind of more balanced, I think, way of living better in harmony with our planet and with others as well. So to me, I think the remote working is a big thing. It's gonna be a big trend that we'll see more and more embraced by employers and by employees as well. I'm hoping that one in particular will stay because many of us saw the benefit. And I know for some it was a struggle. So I mean, those who have younger kids, or for example, some people who are not as comfortable with technology, they struggled. But hopefully
don't have technology.
So don't have technology, absolutely. So I'm hoping that collectively, as society, we can help those who, are in this gap to kind of catch up and be able to embrace this new way of doing things, at least partly, because it has so many benefits. So I mean, for me, the other thing is also everybody realized, obviously, everybody who was isolated misses their loved ones, etc. And we all found a way to either, compensate virtually to spend that time, or try to invent new ways of interacting with those who are close to us. So I think that's another important thing I like to remember. I mean, this, Rudayna, with my son, Qais, I mean, we spend obviously 24/7 at home. We started thinking about doing other ways for us to learn together and engage together. And we created this initiative called Ubud, where me and him, and he invites other friends from around the world to interview Changemaker. And we got a chance to interview actually, which was really nice. It's a great way for him to learn, to meet new people who are adults. For me also to see how he's actually growing through this experience. And for me to introduce him to great friends and great individuals to inspire. So I'm hoping everybody managed to find like a new way of doing things that they keep, which keeps us balanced as individuals as well.
I love that. And I hope that we don't go back with a vengeance, start to make up for things that we did gain ground on. And I think this is where what you're onto, which is quantifying and putting it in front of organizations, in front of people, is extremely important. So we're going to be watching this space, and we'd love to have another conversation about this when you've had the chance to do some piloting and data gathering, because I think this is very exciting.
No, that would be great. I mean, another side for me, I didn't mention earlier, but I'm originally from Tunisia, so it's a developing country, and we saw a country where the government needed help to go through the crisis, from the civil society, from the private sector, etc. And the solidarity that happened, during those times of panic where, we're hit with the pandemic. What do we do now? How do we get ready? And everybody basically, chipped in, whether it's money or, time or thinking, etc. I love to see that, and how maybe there's a new way of governing a country or a city that is more participatory, more inclusive. For me, that's another element that I saw quite interesting. And within that specifically, because I'm very involved in the startup community in Tunisia and the MENA region in general, what we saw is like a very fast digital acceleration. Everybody, all of a sudden, things that we've been waiting for to happen for many, many years, guess what? We are able to do them in a week now, because the pandemic helped us align our goals, and our priorities. So, for example, in Tunisia, within maybe a week time, mobile payment became possible. We've been talking about it for ages. And the reason why it happened is because the government was dispersing aids to a portion of the population that is vulnerable, and everybody was lining up in the post office to get that money, etc. So that was a risk to, a health risk for everybody, and they had to figure out a way to do it differently. And guess what? Mobile payment, is the solution. So everything unlocked, every complications that we had before became solved. So I love this also digital acceleration that is happening, especially in countries that are developing or emerging. It was good news, from.
Yeah. That's also been my experience with working with teachers and vulnerable communities, and their resistance to adapt and adopt to digital, and poof, as you say, in 2 weeks, the whole model flipped, and the engagement was just something we've been trying to do for so much longer than that.
Yeah, and partnership became all of a sudden, easy to build. The goals seem to be aligned quite quickly. Yeah. So yeah, these are other positives as well that I'm hope will create change in mindsets.
Super, I love that. Great note to end on, ending with hope of changing systems, of changing governance, of changing behavior patterns. And we'd love to continue this conversation, as I said, and have you back again in the future. Thank you so much, Rym.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. All right.
Great. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.